What's happening, everybody? Are you ready for UFC 284? The reverse shit sandwich, which is happening this week, which is the bread in this sandwich is two pieces of shit, which is the Sergey Spivak versus Sergey Spivak versus Derek Lewis card, which will be the other side of the shit sandwich, will be the Aaron Blanchfield versus Tyler Santos card. But the meat in this sandwich is going to be a really good pay-per-view card with two title fights, one of them being an interim title fight, and then we've got a unification bout as we got a super fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev, the 5-round main event in this fight, which will be happening at 155 pounds. At 145 pounds for the interim featherweight title, it's going to be Yair Rodrigues versus Josh Emmett. Great card, really from top to bottom. I'm really happy to break down all 13 of these fights with you guys tonight here on Just the Tip. And I'm looking forward to finding some ways to stack cash tickets like flapjacks on this card, because last week was a really light card for me with there being a lot of lower level fights and a lot of unknown commodities. And this week, we've got a lot of guys that have extensive resumes. We do have some people that are making their debut on this card as well, but we've got a good amount of tape on pretty much everybody. And we've been able to do the research in order to find the angles on these fights that we need to find in order to cash some tickets. So I'm looking forward to breaking down all 13 of these fights with you guys today. I had an up week last week, but it was a very, very small up week. I had one really good bet and then one of the worst bets probably that I'm going to make all year. The worst bet, Dennis Tialulin's money line for 1 unit. Lost 1 unit on that at plus 199. Whoo, boy, was that a rough one, everyone. Yeah, he wasn't close. He got dominated and taken down easily, which I wasn't really expecting that Jun-Yong Park would be able to take him down and hold him down as easily as he did. But Dennis had nothing for him on the ground. Easy loss of 1 unit there. But I also had a half unit on Hyun-Sung Park to win inside the distance. That was at plus 275. This guy had finished every one of his fights except for one as a pro, and that was his debut. So he was on a 6-fight win streak, which was all finishes. The guy's ground game was at a much higher level than Choi's. So I was expecting him to kind of go to the grappling early and often, which he didn't do. But as soon as he went for a takedown in the 3rd round, he went and got Choi's back, and he wound up subbing him with a rear naked choke. So wound up cashing 1.35 units, something like that. I mean, something like that, 1.35 units. So up 0.35 units on the week. Bankroll management is key. I kept it small, was profitable, but definitely nothing, spectacular by any stretch of the imagination. The judges were flat out awful. As a matter of fact, the Hyun-Sung Park fight, he lost those first 2 rounds clearly, and one of the judges by the name of Winter had this guy up 2-0, Hyun-Sung Park. He lost both those rounds clearly, the first and the second. And then wound up getting the finish in the 3rd, so it didn't wind up mattering. But then Yi Jia, wow, did he absolutely get robbed. What that was probably a fixed fight, because not only was the judging completely, I mean, there was no explanation for how you could have come up with 2 rounds for Jun-Yong Lee in that spot. He was dominated over half the fight and controlled over half the fight on the ground and on the cage. And at distance, they both landed the same amount of strikes. I mean, it was an absolute joke. Park never had Yi in any trouble at all. And then Yi gets fouled while being in top control. They stop the fight. They don't penalize Park. And then they take the position away from Yi in the 2nd round, letting Lee back up. And so Mark Smith, either he's very incompetent or he was trying to get Lee, who was supposed to win the fight, back up on the feet there. So I really hadn't seen that in a minute, something so blatantly probably fixed, because it seemed like the ref was in on it, and then 2 judges got paid off is what it looks like there, because the other judge had it 30-27, which is the only way that anybody with an IQ above 80 would have, or somebody that wasn't rooting for Jun Yong Lee would have scored that fight. So my sympathy to the Yi bettors, and the Choi bettors almost got screwed if Park didn't get that finish, because one of the guys had 2 rounds for Choi there, for Park there. So very interesting. Hopefully this judging gets better, but it probably won't. This is a very, very corrupt sport. The judges are very corrupt, and the commissions are very corrupt. But we've still got to do our best to take notes, to watch tape, to study the stats, to find angles, to compare these lines to what the risk that we're putting out there. And hopefully we can make good decisions over the long term, that even when the judges do steal us money out of our pockets, that we can wind up persevering and still making money in the long term. I want to see what's up to everybody in the chat here today, and we have got Gogo Flamingo is the first in the room, and he says, happy Parker Porter fight week, everyone. His fat ass should be the official mascot of Just the Tip. Hell yeah, man, dude. We want to get these pockets thicker than Parker Porter's ass. Fat pockets, fat Parker Porter pockets is what we want after we get these bets cashed every week. So appreciate you, Gogo Flamingo. Thank you for hanging out with us here tonight. We've got Victor De Jesus is in the room saying, oi, yes. We've got M.A. Laren in the room saying, oi, let's make that Flapjacks pile of 284 units. Let's get it, M.A. Laren. Thank you for hanging out with us today. We got Daz Dillinger in the room, one of my favorite rappers from back in the day, saying, oi, yes, Uncle Weezy, our #1 UFC analyst. Let's go. What's up, Daz? It is good to see you up in here. We got DJ saying, oi, pump for this card. We got Porter Tafa on the main card. Woof. Yeah, that's rough. That is not a main card fight for sure. And DJ saying, oh, it's same thing over again. We got Cuban Assassin in the room saying, Weezy, Weez, what it do? Let's get that cheese. My friend I haven't talked to in years hit me up randomly to see if I wanted Brendan Schaub tickets. Wow. He's probably having a hard time giving those away. I asked him if he was gay and told him to lose my number. Let's go, my man, Cuban Assassin. Always with the great stuff here in the chat. I appreciate you, brother. We got Papa Chuck in the room saying, let's get after it. What's up, Chuck? Good to see you, man. We got Daniel Hernandez in the room saying, oi. And we've got Martin Dermov in the room saying, oi. Who in their right mind thought to put Tafa versus Porter on a pay-per-view main event? Jesus effing Christ. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense, but they do it every time. If there's something about their marketing research that tells them that they have to put a low-level heavyweight fight on every pay-per-view card. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me, but they do it every damn time, and I don't know why. It's like I don't know. And if not that low-level heavyweight fight, there will be a very low-level flyweight fight that nobody cares about, women's flyweight fight. That, like, people are like, why is this on the card? I was going to say Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade, but at least Jessica Andrade is a draw. And we got Nigel Lee saying, oi, what's up, Nigel? And we've got, you're the meat and the De Jesus mushroom sandwich. Good to see you. Oh, God, I appreciate you. Go. We got DJ saying, girlfriend and I bought Apex tickets to Vera Sandhagen. Then fucking Dana switched it out to Blanchfield Santos. So, yeah, I'm eating a big $5,000 shit sandwich. Wow. You were going to see a legit main event between 2 studs in the most stacked division in the UFC with Sandhagen and Vera. And then now you get it switched out to a card where literally the co-main event, everybody, is Zach Pauga versus Jordan Wright. I am not making that up. It's really, really a bad card. We got Mushroom MMA in the room with the new logo. Loving it, man. Saying, oi, yes. What's up, Uncle Weezy? Gonna stack him as high as Willie Nelson on a spaceship. Let's get it, man. And we got Mushroom saying, what's up, all to all the D-gens in the room. Any action Effie in the room saying, yes, sir. What's up, everybody? We got Mushroom saying, what's up to Vic? We got Maddalena saying, oh, and we got JR saying, Weezy is one bad boy. Appreciate you, JR. We got Kevin saying, rolling any profit from UFC pay-per-view into the Super Bowl. Let's have a great weekend, y'all. Let's get it. Let's get it, Kevin. We got Ice Viking saying, I was just watching WizBets and Lou Betcha talking football, but then I saw something better came up. Let's go, Uncle Weezy. Yeah, I do prefer the MMA to the football. My guys Wiz and Lou are awesome, but yeah, football. I'm already done with football for the year. I'm can't wait for it to go away, to be honest with you. Go Flamingo saying, Mushroom, what's up, my favorite fungi? We got Mushroom saying, what's up to Ice Viking? We got Ice Viking saying, what's up to Mushroom? Keith Often Look saying, good day, Uncle Weezy in chat. We got MMA Code in the room saying, oi. We got Bunkhoot saying, Uncle Weezy, the juice. What up, Mush? What's up, dude? Good to see you guys hanging out in here. We got Jeffrey Coringold there with a chocolate donut. Appreciate you, Jeff. Good to see you guys hanging out. Let's get into it. Let's start breaking down these fights. What do you say? The curtain jerker on this card is going to be Zubaira Tukhugov going up against the short notice replacement in Elves Brenner. And we've got Tukhugov here is minus 600. And Elvis Brenner is plus 400 with the fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at minus 105. And by the way, the stats that you're looking at here can be obtained on the Patreon. We got the basic stats for $5 a month. And then at the beginning of March, I'm going to be offering a new advanced stats package, which will include the Patreon, which will include the prop template, the distance striking, and all the the analytics that I've gotten hold of. And then we're also going to be looking at some DFS templates to go along in that package, and also some analytics templates for prize picks, underdog, monkey knife fight if they're still doing it, all that kind of stuff, these over-under props. Because I now have all the data between 2013 and present, I'm going to be creating some new analytics for everybody here that's going to make everybody sharper DFS players and sharper prize picks players, because they're going to have access to all the information that I have lovingly accrued over the last few years and curated and wound up getting as many analytics out of it as possible. So benefit from your Uncle Weezy's work. Join the Patreon. I've got some big new things planned for this Patreon, and I plan on it being the best analytics-based Patreon for UFC bettors that is out there for the money, period. And I promise you, nobody's going to give you the kind of access to information that I will for the price that you're going to pay. So look into, please, supporting me on that Patreon. I'd like to thank the people this week that just signed up. I know my guy Bunk Hoots is one of them. Got somebody else to sign up today for the prop template. So I appreciate everybody that supports the work over on Patreon, because that's where I actually get to keep the money that you guys support me with. YouTube takes so much of what you guys support us with that if you guys knew how much they were taking, you might not support me anymore, to be honest with you, on YouTube. So I appreciate everybody that takes the time to join that Patreon. That is the best way to really support your Uncle Weezy and help me for doing the work that I work so hard to give to you guys. So yeah, let's get into it, everybody. Zubaira Tukhugov minus 600 up against the short notice replacement in Elvis Brenner at plus 400. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys here. And we've got all these stats up here. Like I say, the new distance striking stats here on offense and defense. We've got ratios of control time won. We've got the amount of time spent in control times positions and the amount of time spent at distance striking range. Truly a cornucopia of statistics to help you make better decisions with your gambling dollar. But let me see something here. All right. Let me get my notes up on the screen. And Zubaira Tukhugov versus Elvis Brenner. Let's first talk about Zuba here. He has a hand-to-hand and combat sambo background. and he was a Russian national champion in combat sambo. He's 5-2-1 in the UFC, and of the 6 fights that have went to decision, 4 of them have been split decisions. Zuba's finished 2 UFC opponents in the first round, Ernest Chavez and Kevin Aguilar. Zuba's got 100% takedown defense in the UFC thus far, but it's a bit deceiving because he's only faced 5 takedown attempts, and they were all in one fight and it was the one against Felipe Nover, who's really a lot more of a kickboxer than a wrestler. So I don't really know what his takedown defense and ground game really look like if he gets put on the bottom. And I think Brenner will try to get this fight to the ground because he's going to be at striking disadvantage here. Zuba is explosive on the feet, you guys. He covers distance quickly. He keeps his hands down on defense, but that allows him to throw from odd angles and with lots of torque on his punches and hip turn as well. And he looks to land big. Zuba does get outlanded and outvolumed at distance in the UFC, but he keeps fights standing 83% of the time, and he's won almost 96% of the control time positions he's been in thus far because he's outlanded his opponents on takedowns 16-0. It's hard to find a path here for Brenner outside of a Hail Mary submission. And Brenner, Elvis has got a 13-3 pro record with 12 of those 13 wins coming by finish, and a whopping 11 of the 12 finishes coming by way of submission. 6 of those subs were by armbar, 3 by rear naked choke, 1 triangle, and 1 ghillie. So Elvis has never been finished despite being in there against tough guys like Gabriel Santos and Dreve and Silva. He also lost to. He has fought Russians before, and he's faced wrestling-heavy attacks. Elvis' striking is kind of funky and unorthodox. He only has 1 career knockout win, so he clearly prefers to grapple. And I haven't seen much from him on tape to suggest that he will have much success on the feet against Zuba. I've also seen Brenner get put in some bad spots on the ground, particularly in the Santos fight. So I do see Tukhugov being the better and more dangerous fighter everywhere in this spot. Zuba's, and Brenner is taking this fight on short notice. He's replacing somebody else that Zuba was supposed to fight. And, so he's coming all the way from South America to Australia. It's a long-ass flight. He's a shoot box guy. So, he spars hard. He's going to be tough to finish. He's going to be gutty. But Zuba's much more experienced, and he's much more dangerous everywhere in comparison to Elvis. Elvis is taking this fight on short notice, and Zuba tends to land big shots in the first when he's fresh. Other than the fact that Elvis is over 6 years younger than Zuba, I really don't see him having any advantages anywhere in this fight. Brenner is a shoot box guy who's never been finished before, but that will be tested in this matchup. I think I'm going to pick Zubaira to win this one by first-round knockout because that is really when Zuba is the most dangerous. His 2 finishes at the UFC level were in the first round, and we've seen him spark a couple of guys there in the first as well and been unable to get the finish against guys like Laron Murphy. He had Ramos hurt in the first. So he does go out there and hurt guys. I think he's just going to be much better here. Also, this fight is taking place at 155 pounds. It was listed at 145 earlier in the week, but now UFC Stats has updated this fight, and they are calling it a lightweight fight. So Zuba's moving up, and so is Elvis Brenner because he's taking this fight on short notice. So, the pick is going to be Zubaira Tukhugov by first-round knockout. The next fight is going to be Shane Young versus Blake Bilder. So let's get that banner up here. Shane Young is minus 135. Blake Bilder is plus 115, and the fight doesn't go to decision, is sitting at minus 125 here. It's a very interesting fight. Let's start talking about Shane Young, though, and get the stats up on the screen here for you guys. So there we go. Shane Young is a city kickboxing guy. He's fighting near home in Australia here. He is mostly a striker. He pressures his opponents while keeping a low, wide stance. He works behind his jab. He goes to the body, and he throws in combination. But he keeps his hands low, and he gets countered a lot. Definitely there to be hit, but he does have a serviceable 59% striking defense at range. His pressure and volume and solid chin are the best parts of his striking game. And we've seen that pressure get to his opponents particularly in the Rolando D and the Austin Arnett fights. Shane hasn't shown much of an ability to win minutes with his grappling game, as he's only been 3 of 13 on his takedowns, and he's accrued less than 10.2% control time while allowing 17.6% control time to his opponents, with only 56.25% takedown defense so far for Shane Young. I feel as if Shane is unable to win minutes or moments at this level unless he finds an opponent that isn't dangerous and will wilt under the pressure and volume he throws. Now, Blake gets hit a lot, but he is not somebody that's going to wilt, okay? Blake is one tough dude, and you basically got to kill him to get him out of there. He's fought his way back from adversity several times in his career, and he's a very opportunistic finisher with great back takes and slick submissions. In the Fuente fight, Blake got dominated from top control for the entire first round, got dropped at the beginning of the second, but he used his grappling to slow the fight down. He held on to a Kimura and regained his guard with it, he regained his guard with that. Then he attacked from his back with a couple of gogo platas. He eventually finished the fight with about 30 seconds left in the second with a triangle choke. In the first versus in the Carvalho fight, he got dropped 3 times in that fight and was 10-8 in the first. But right at the beginning of the second round, he dropped Carvalho and he took his back and he stayed there for the rest of the round. And then he pressured the shit out of him in the third and eventually landed a big shot on the feet and finished him. He's tough. There's no quit in him. He can push a pace for the whole fight. He moves a lot on the feet, including his head, but he can be hard to find at times because of that head movement. But at other times when he is kind of like throwing in the pocket, he will put his chin up there and he will be easy to counter. So he does tend to get dropped by big shots quite a bit. His best minute winning potential comes with his grappling and ability to get to his opponent's back, but I haven't seen him wrestle too much on tape. If I could be sure that he would wrestle successfully in spots here, I'd definitely pull the trigger on his money line. But this could be a back and forth war, and both guys are very durable. I think Bilder is the far more dangerous fighter here, though, especially in the grappling. Shane is 3 years younger than Blake. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage. He's the far more experienced pro fighter, and he has 5 more UFC level fights and over 55 more minutes in the UFC cage to Shane Young. Young should be the better minute winner at distance striking range with his pressure and volume, and he's fought the better brand of competition in his career. Blake Bilder, though, he's going to be the much better submission grappler, and he looks to be the more opportunistic finisher anywhere the fight goes and at any point in the fight, even if he gets rocked. So I see this being a back and forth war, but with Blake making his debut in Australia against an experienced opponent in front of a very hostile crowd is going to be a really, really tall order for him. I think Shane Young is more likely to win a decision, while Bilder is definitely the more likely guy to get a finish in this fight. But the official pick is going to be Shane Young to win by decision. So let me get the picks up here for you guys on Tapology so that you can follow along with what I'm going with. So I'm picking Zubaira Tukhugov to win by first round knockout against Elves Brenner. Even though Brenner has never been finished before and he appears to be a very tough dude, Zuba just has a tendency to land big shots in the first round. And when he does land that big shot, he swarms and looks to finish. So he could just have Brenner might even be okay, but he could have the ref just peel Zubaira off of him. In addition to that, we've seen Zuba slow down later in fights. And now that he's not cutting down to 145, we could potentially see him, being able to put a pace on for longer here. But, we're going to call Shane Young by decision here. If this fight was in the United States, I think I'd be picking Blake Bilder. But I don't want to ignore the fact that going from anywhere basically in the world that's not in Southeast Asia or in Oceania to Australia is a nightmare of a trip. So guys like Blake Bilder, who have probably never even fought outside of the United States before, to make a trip and make his UFC debut in hostile territory in Australia. It's such a tall order that I think I'm going to call Shane Young to win this one by decision. The next fight that we're going to talk about here is going to be Loma Lookboonmee, the handsome young lady at minus 275, big favorite here, coming about from a 5-hour flight away from Thailand. And she's going to be squaring off against Elise Reed, another American here, who's plus 235 in this spot. The fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at plus 215. This is going to be an interesting fight. Let me get these stats up here on the screen for you guys. And there we go. Loma versus Elise. Now, we'll start with talking about Loma. She is a Muay Thai striker. Her parents own a gym. She started training Muay Thai at the age of 7. On the feet, she's technical. She offers lots of feints. She's got fast, sharp kicks, and she throws hard elbows, knees, and has great foot sweeps in the clinch. Loma's not a good submission grappler, but she excels in the clinch at being mean and landing strikes there. But she also does really well getting trips from the clinch, where she then gets on top and can drop some really mean ground and pound with her elbows. She's a solid minute winner on the feet at distance, but she's rounding out her game and using those Muay Thai trips, elbows, and knees to win minutes in the clinch and on the ground. So she's really finding more and more ways to win minutes with the diversity of her attack. Elise Reed has a Taekwondo striking base. She's got a stiff, straight right hand that she lands often, and we even saw her round out her game in the Martinez fight by showing some decent get-ups and some takedowns and some ground and pound of her own in that fight. That being said, unless this fight stays at distance for the majority of the fight and Reed is able to avoid the clinch and not absorb leg kicks, she's going to have a hard time winning minutes against Loma. Other than a 2-inch reach advantage, Loma has the experience, the durability, the striking, and the wrestling, and the strength of schedule, and the control time advantages in this spot over Elise Reed. So this is a tough row to hoe for Elise. She's a 20-hour flight from home, outmatched on the feet in most likelihood, but she's definitely outmatched on the ground here. I could see her doing okay if it remains at striking range for long periods of time, which is where Reed is at her most comfortable. But Loma has trained Muay Thai since she was 7, and she won't be out of her depth anywhere in this fight. I think Loma cruises here, uses her trips and top control and ground and pound potentially to even get a late finish with her top control and with her ground and pound, because Elise Reed is just not ready to grapple at this level yet. She's very new to grappling. Her base is Taekwondo. Her base is striking. And she can wrestle a little bit against other pure strikers like Melissa Martinez. But you saw what happened against Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes made her look silly on the ground. And that's even Sam Hughes, her base is Muay Thai. So, and we saw Loma Lookboonmee get a lot of takedowns off of Sam Hughes and accrue some good ground control time off of Sam Hughes. And we saw Sam Hughes do that to Elise Reed. So, I mean, MMA math doesn't work all of the time, but it's a good indicator when you have the same opponent for both fighters to compare how they did against that opponent. And to see Elise Reed get ragdolled by Sam, but then to see Sam not do well in the wrestling exchanges against Loma really leads you to believe that even though this might be close on the feet, because Elise Reed's a really solid stand-up striker, that all Loma has to do is really get this thing to the clinch or get it to the ground with her Muay Thai clinch trips and sweeps and hip tosses, and she can easily win minutes on the ground here. So, I think that, Loma will win this one fairly easily. I think her money line is a decent parlay piece this week. And I even think that Loma getting a late finish or a fight doesn't go to decision bet here could be a sneaky plus money number that has a decent shot to cash if Elise hasn't made improvements to her defense on the ground. So, yeah, Loma Lookboonmee, and I think I'm going to pick her to win by decision, but I could see her getting a finish here, and I might take a small stab at either Loma inside the distance or Loma by knockout because, I'm just worried about Elise Reed's ground game here. It just has not looked good at the UFC level, and the conditioning hasn't been great either, frankly. So we will see how this goes, but the pick is going to be Loma Lookboonmee by decision. The next fight, Jack Jenkins, a great homegrown Australian prospect at minus 335, is squaring off against the shameless one, Don Shainis, at plus 275. We've got the fight doesn't go to decision, juiced up to minus 210 here. So let's get these stats up on the screen, and I'll get my notes up on the screen as well, and let's take you through this fight. So we've got Jack Jenkins is 29 years old. On the feet, he switches stances. He's had 12 pro fights, and he's 10-2 in those 12 fights with 8 wins by finish. He's got 5 knockouts, and he's got 3 submissions. He was finishing his only 2 losses, but they were back in 2017 and 2018. So it's been 5 or 6 years since he's been finished. Right now, he's currently on a 7-fight win streak. For a guy with only 12 pro fights, Jack Jenkins is very well-rounded. He's got no real holes in his game that I can see. The conditioning, check. The submission grappling, check. The pressure, power, and volume on the feet and good technical boxing, check. Good technique in the clinch, check. Durability and heart, check. He switches stances on the feet quite a bit. He stays behind his jab, and he lets that set up his power strikes, which include nasty low leg kicks that he throws a lot of. He finished both the second Funky Cole Medina fight. He lost to Medina the first time. Second time he beat him. And the Petropolis fight, a good Greek kid that he beat there by landing those nasty calf kicks. So it really does make it hard to stand in front of this kid and trade with him, because every time you plant your feet, this kid's trying to kick the bottom of your leg off. So he really does look like a finished product right now. He displays good fight IQ. If he displays good fight IQ at the UFC level, he should be able to find several ways and paths to win minutes and moments at the UFC level. So I'm really intrigued to see how Jenkins, progresses now. He's not like a brand new kid. He's 29 years old. So he's coming into his athletic prime here. And he's definitely showing off a very well-rounded skill set for somebody who has the experience numbers that he has. Now, Don Shainis, he's a wild man. This guy goes out there to scrap. He's got great conditioning, great toughness, great heart, and he doesn't shy away from a fight ever. But he's undersized for the division at 5'6" with a 67-inch reach. He's 12-4 in his pro career with 10 wins coming inside the distance. He's got 8 knockouts and 2 submissions to his credit. Don's really easy to take down. But once you get him down, you have to be very careful of getting swept. I mean, he gets butterfly hooks in, and he does elevator sweeps and just basically lifts up your hips. If he can get his heels on your hips, you usually go for a ride, and he winds up on top of you. And once Don does get those sweeps, he's showing off some really great top control and ground and pound. That being said, I've seen Don get stuck on his back for long periods of time on the regional scene. So if he doesn't pull off that butterfly sweep, then it's easy to win minutes against the ground, on the ground against him with wrestling, with top control blended with ground and pound. On the feet, Don pressures to close the distance, and he throws hooks trying to take your head off. He's going to have a hard time getting wins, though, at this level with just guile, heart, durability, and conditioning. Because, other than that, he doesn't offer much of a threat anywhere else at this level other than just being that scrappy dude that just doesn't fuck off and that will keep, marching forward and throwing hooks and, mixing in takedown attempts, a lot of ups and downs, a big pace, great conditioning, great pressure. That can break a lot of people when they don't have the skills in order to get the respect of their opponents, or when they can't deal with the pressure and maybe get takedowns. But Shainis is a guy where if he had much better takedown defense, that style would be something that could translate to wins up at this level. But he doesn't have good takedown defense. So if you don't like the pressure on the feet, you can kind of just take this guy down, watch for those heels to get into your hips. And if you can avoid that past the half guard, you can stay on the top of this guy for long swaths of time. And that's exactly what we saw Jack Jenkins do in his Contender Series fight, where he accrued a ton of control time. And I think he got at least 2.5 to 3 minutes of control time against his opponent in every round and got a takedown in every round. So Jack Jenkins, I think, is going to be better on the feet. I think he's going to be more dangerous on the feet. I also think he's the better wrestler and submission grappler and control time grappler here. And then add to that Don Shainis is going all the way to Australia, super long flight, fighting in front of a hostile crowd against a guy that really doesn't have any weaknesses in his game. So I think as long as Jack, fights smart here, he should cruise. So Jack is going to be 3 years younger than Don. He's got a 1-inch height and reach advantage, and he's on par experience-wise in terms of pro cage time with Don Shainis. Both guys are fantastic finishers, and both guys have been finished in their losses for the most part. Jack will be the more technical boxer. He showed great wrestling and top control in his DWCS fight, which will serve him well against an opponent like Shainis. I see Jenkins being better literally everywhere in this fight, but Don is a tough out who can take advantage of mistakes on the ground if you get overzealous. And he goes out there to scrap and tries to find ways to break his opponents. But I do see Jack winning this, probably inside the distance, probably late. I'm going to pick Jack Jenkins to win this fight. And I will say it is going to be a third-round knockout for Mr. Jack Jenkins. Great prospect. Really can't wait to see him make his debut, and he gets to do it in his home country of Australia against an opponent who's making only his second UFC appearance and who was finished in 30 seconds in his debut UFC appearance. So, yeah, great fight, really exciting fight, and I think Jack Jenkins is going to do work here and open some eyes on Saturday. And then the next fight is going to be Jamie Mullarkey going up against Francisco Prado. And we have got Mullarkey juiced up to minus 270 as a favorite. Francisco Prado plus 230 as the underdog. The fight doesn't go to decision, minus 225. So the bookies are saying about a 70% chance that this thing goes, finishes inside the distance, almost 70%. All right. So let's get down to business here. Let's first talk about Jamie Mullarkey here. He's got good size and experience numbers for the division. 6 feet tall, 74-inch reach. He's got 20 pro fights and 158 minutes in the pro cage, along with 6 UFC fights and almost 60 minutes in the UFC cage. Jamie's definitely a finisher. He's finished 12 of his last 13 wins. The one he didn't finish was a very close fight against Michael Johnson that some argue he actually lost. He caught Kama Worthy with a perfect left hook in the first, and he broke Devontae Smith in the second round with pressure, volume, durability, and pace. And in the second round, once Smitty figured out that Jamie wasn't going to fuck off, Jamie got him out of there. On the feet, Jamie offers lots of pressure, volume, head movement. He features a nasty lead left hook, and he has nice kicks to all 3 targets on the body. His boxing is solid, but he definitely gets hit a lot. His distance striking defense is 57%, which is subpar. Jamie can make pace a weapon by mixing in the wrestling, and he has definitely done that thus far in the UFC, as he's attempted 33 takedowns in less than 60 minutes of cage time. Jamie's fights are in control time positions 30% of the time, and he's winning 73% of those positions. So he can find ways to win minutes in the stand-up, in the clinch, and on the ground. So he's a good, well-rounded, experienced opponent here for Francisco Prado. Jamie's got a good chin as well. He can recover after being hurt, which he showed in the first round of the Michael Johnson fight by recovering after being sparked. And he even landed a big shot of his own. Then he turned up the pressure and pace in the second to win that round dominantly. So Jamie can definitely drag his opponents into wars. And if they don't thrive there, he can drown them. Jamie's also fought and beaten the far better brand of competition in comparison to Prado. And Prado is taking this fight on short notice, a long flight away from home, and he's making his debut in front of a hostile crowd on short notice. So if Prado can't get Jamie out of there early, it could be a long night for him. But Cisco Prado is only 20 years old, and he's making his debut here. He's already 11-0 as a pro with a 100% finish rate. 6 submissions, 5 knockouts in those 11 finishes. He's finished the Tavares fight by getting a takedown. He showed solid ground and pound from the guard. He passed a half, attempted a sub, then passed to his back, got hooks in, flattened him out, and finished him with ground and pound. Then in the next fight that I saw on the tape, he blasted this guy named Ribeiro on the feet. He took him down and ground and pounded him. Then Ribeiro rolled for Prado's leg. They went to a 50-50 position, and then Prado wound up getting swept, but then he immediately subbed Ribeiro with an armbar from guard. The next fight that I saw against somebody named Basuardo, Basuardo took Prado down easily in the first and won the round with like 3 minutes of top control. The stand-up exchanges were close, but Prado came out aggressive in the second, blasted him with the knee in the clinch, and finished it shortly thereafter on the ground. Versus Perron, he got a high amplitude takedown right away, passed him out, and he finished with ground and pound. And in the Barrios fight, which is the most recent one that's available on the tape index, Prado threw wild hooks and pressured Prado, or he pressured Barrios, and he slept Barrios early in the first. The kid is short. He's built like a fire plug. He looks like the Argentinian version of Drew Dober. I mean, when you watch the tape on this kid, he looks just like Drew Dober, body-wise, in the face. He's got the same build, all that shit, and he hits hard like Drew Dober does. The problem is that he doesn't really have any signature wins. He's taking this fight on like 10 days notice, and he has to fly from Argentina to Australia and fight Mullarkey in front of his home crowd. So there's a massive potential for an adrenaline dump here if Prado doesn't finish this fight early. It's a tall order for your UFC debut to fight Mullarkey in front of his home crowd on a long flight on short notice. So this fight should be a war while it lasts. Mullarkey is bigger, he's longer, he's more experienced, and he's probably more durable, but we still need to find out how durable Prado is, as he's never lost yet in his career. I see this fight finishing under 1.5 rounds and it being a fight of the night candidate due to both guys' willingness to scrap and be in wars. I'm going to be picking Mullarkey to win this fight by second round knockout after Francisco Prado has an adrenaline dump. I think we can count on Mullarkey's durability in the first, but dude, this guy Prado, and tell me he doesn't look like Drew Dober. I mean, I wonder if anybody's ever seen these guys in the same room again. It's now Drew Dober is in his 30s, and he figured he'd pretend to be 20 and Argentinian from here on out. But you're not fooling anyone, Dober, if that's the case. If you're trying to pull this shit off, your Uncle Weezy's on to you. But if I'm wrong about that, my apologies. Most humble go to Francisco Prado, who will be making his debut in front of that Australian crowd, which will be very loud, very drunk, and very hostile. But this guy Prado, without being drunk in the cage, he's loud and he's hostile too. And he throws with serious power and purpose behind everything that he throws. And if he clips you, you're probably going down. But yeah, Mullarkey by second round knockout is the pick. And I do have a bet on this fight. If we look at the new prop template here, which we debuted on the MMA Engine Probability this week, we can see that the Mullarkey Prado under 1.5 is sitting at plus 155. And Francisco Prado, all 10 of his fights have finished under 2.5 rounds. And 9 of his 10 fights have finished under 1.5 rounds. And Mullarkey's fights have finished under 1.5 rounds outside of the UFC 4 of 9 times. So 68% of these guys combined non-UFC fights have finished under 1.5 rounds, and we're only paying 39% on the line. And in addition to that, Prado has, like I said, 9 times out of 10, his fights have finished under 1.5 rounds. He's taking the fight on short notice, could be an adrenaline dump in front of a very hostile crowd, and in front of and with a well-rounded, experienced opponent like Mullarkey, who's been a very good finisher in his own right. As we see that Mullarkey, in his fights outside of the UFC, 8 of 9 haven't went to decision. And for Prado, it's 10 of 10. So both of these guys are obviously finishers. 95% of their combined non-UFC fights have finished inside the distance. But the difference in implied probability between 72% and 39% to get both of these guys at their best, finish rates here, I think is the way to attack this. A big fat plus money number at plus 155. 1 unit on that is the first bet of the week, you guys. So, yeah, and then the pick, like I said, is going to be Jamie Mullarkey by second round knockout. And let me just look real quick here. You guys are killing it in the chat. Weezy, before you get into your analysis and pick, how much would they be affected if Islam missed weight badly? As in really trying, looking bad on the scales, but still a couple of pounds over. It would matter. It definitely would matter because, Volkanovski is probably the second best pound for pound fighter on the planet right now. So, you just don't want to fight that guy anything less than 100%. So, yeah, and Sean V saying Prado's a beast. He's 4-0 in 2022, and all his opponents had winning records. One was like 22-4. Yeah, they're lower level opponents, but when you watch the kid Prado on tape, he's there to fucking scrap. He is looking to punt your head into the third row, into the cheap seats, out of the stadium. And he has success doing that. He's going to stand in front of you and throw bombs. So if you're not very careful about how you approach this kid, you might wind up looking up at the lights for sure. Yeah, man, it's going to be a really good one. And then, yeah, dude, my guy DFS by the numbers in the room, complimenting Mushroom's video on Twitter. And I've been watching his content. My guy Mushroom stepping into the game and doing some fantastic work. Keep up the good work, brother. Always good to see people from the community stepping up and putting some work in, man. I appreciate you guys for watching. We've got 57 of you guys live rocking with us here, breaking down this UFC 284 card. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do. If you haven't hit that thumbs up button yet, please do. And please consider joining the Patreon. The banner is right here. Patreon.com/Uncle Weezy. $5 a month or $20 a month to get you some of the best analytics that you can right now. And what's coming in March is going to be mind-blowing, I can assure you guys. But the next fight that we're going to talk about right here is Kleydson Rodrigues versus the hometown kid in Shannon Ross. Claydson's a big favorite here at -320 to come back on Shannon Ross, +270. Fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at -130. So we've got the stats up here on the screen. And Shannon Ross will be making his debut, and Kleydson Rodrigues only has one UFC fight. It was against CJ Vergara, and he lost a very close split decision there. But he did have a really impressive Dana White Contender Series fight against Santo Curatolo. So let me get my notes up here. So let's talk about Shannon Ross first. Shannon is the definition of a regional scene veteran. He's got 18 pro fights in an almost 13-year pro career. He's got a 12-6 record with approximately a 50% finish rate in his wins and his losses. Shannon won the vacant Eternal MMA Championship against a 5-3 Paul Loga, but he was unable to defend it 1 year later, getting finished in the first round by rear naked choke after getting dropped on the feet to 5-1 Steve Urseg. When Shannon was on DWCS, he was working full-time as a mechanic. So, he's a hardworking guy who fights for the love of it. He was dropped 3 times, though, and knocked out in the second round of that fight against Vinicius Salvador. But he showed tremendous heart and durability in that fight. So Dana White became a fan of his. Shannon is going to have to make this a war. He's going to have to pressure and grind this fight out because he's not great anywhere, and he's lost the guys on the Australian regional scene that are not UFC level. Shannon has serviceable stand-up, kind of stays behind his jab. He uses it to set up his combinations, throws a lot of 1-2s followed by low leg kicks. He keeps his hands high, but he still gets clipped quite a bit on the feet. Now, Kleydson Rodrigues coming back. KR is a young, up-and-coming prospect. He's only 27 years old, while Shannon Ross is pushing 34. He's got a 7-2 pro record with 5 wins coming inside the distance. He's got 3 knockouts and 2 submissions. He's well-rounded. He uses his kicks well to win minutes at range, and he's averaging 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, 1 submission attempt per 15 minutes, and 2 reverses per 15 minutes. So he's competent on the ground as well. But so far in the UFC and on Dana White Contender Series, the distance striking numbers have been very impressive. KR had a positive 3.37 distance strike differential per minute against Vergara, and he outlanded Santo Curatolo on DWCS at distance 73-17, while throwing over twice as many attempts at distance as well. Kleydson threw 119 distance strike attempts, while Curatolo only threw 48 in that fight. Kleydson spreads out his targets. He offers a lot of variety, and in particular, he's attempted 47 leg strikes in about 22 minutes of distance striking time between those 2 fights. Kleidson's had some problems fighting off his back foot against CJ due to the constant pressure that CJ Vergara brought. CJ landed a big body kick at the beginning of the second against KR, and that made Kleydson shoot, and he got the takedown, but then CJ immediately reversed him, and he got into mount, and then he accrued almost 4 minutes of control time to almost finish out the round before getting reversed at the end and absorbing some shots from KR in the last 30 seconds. Unless Ross walks forward like a zombie and shows a fantastic chin, I don't really see him having much success in this fight outside of landing a big shot on the feet. Kleydson is levels above Shannon on the feet, and he will be taller and longer here. In addition to that, it appears Kleydson will be better on the ground. So outside of the fact that Shannon is more experienced and he's fighting at home in Australia, I'm not sure he has more than a puncher's chance. Shannon is outmatched on the feet against KR's speed, length, and variety of tack that he brings. Kleydson is 6.5 years younger. He's taller. He's longer. He's more powerful and technical on the feet, and he's far slicker on the ground. Shannon has fought solid regional scene competition, but he doesn't have any wins that would come close to being as impressive as the one over Kleydson Rodrigues if he were to get this. So this would be the best win of his career by a mile. I think KR gets the club and sub late in the first or in the second round here. I really do think Kleidson's going to go through this guy. Shannon Ross just really isn't UFC level. He's tough. He's a scrapper. He's durable. He's a great story. And he's going to be a guy that's going to get the hometown crowd fired up because of the way that he fights. But in terms of, a UFC skill set, Shannon Ross is almost 34 years old. He's got 12 wins and 6 losses. And the guys that have beaten him just really aren't, Trash Can Makhachev. The kid that he did lose to Urseg isn't bad. I think he's 7 or 8-1, and he's the eternal MMA champ, and he's put together a pretty good winning streak. But Kleydson Rodrigues beats these guys easily, and I think he beats Shannon Ross easily. So we'll say that Kleydson Rodrigues knocks him out in the second round. And the next fight, really exciting stand-up war that's going to happen between Joshua Culibao, hometown from Australia, and Melsik Baghdsaryan, Armenian, stand up. So let's first talk about Josh here. And then let's talk about the line as well, as we've seen that Josh Culibao and Melsik Baghdsaryan are at a -110 pick'em, with the fight doesn't go to decision at plus money at plus 115. Oh, man. All right. So, start talking about Josh Culibao. He's the younger, taller, and more experienced fighter here, both overall and at the UFC level. Josh's only UFC loss was up a weight class against Jalen the Tarantula Turner. He was clearly losing the fight, but he had a freak non contact ankle injury while circling the outside of the cage trying to stay safe. And that opened the door for Jalen to finish him as soon as it was clear that he was on one leg, and then Jalen just kind of went at him and finished the fight shortly thereafter. But, that fight might have went the full 3 rounds if he didn't hurt his ankle. Like I said, he wasn't winning the fight. He wasn't going to win it, but still, I mean, against a huge opponent like Jalen Turner, especially when Culibao at 145 is a guy who uses his size advantage well. But he was at a huge size disadvantage, being 4 inches shorter than one Jalen Turner, and had a huge reach disadvantage as well. But at 145 pounds in the UFC, Josh is 2 wins, no losses, and 1 draw against really solid competition in Charles Jourdain, Shailan Nurdenbecke, and Sungwoo Choi. So in the striking exchanges, Josh uses his length well. He particularly with his kicks. He switches stances. Wait a second. He switches stances often. He's got a 69% distance striking defense, which is very good, almost 70%. And he stays calm in wild striking exchanges, and that's going to really serve him well against Melsik, who throws with power all the time. Josh really does appear to be improving his striking, as he showed great power in the first against Choi, coming close to finishing him after dropping him. Josh has been unsuccessful on all 11 of his UFC takedown attempts, and he's lost 81% of the control time positions he's been in, and that spans over 37% of his UFC cage time thus far. So that's been a huge hole in Josh's game. Melsik, however, is very unlikely to exploit that hole because he has tried 0 takedowns in his entire UFC career and clearly prefers to strike. So Melsik's a southpaw Muay Thai striker who pressures relentlessly, and he throws straight left bombs and big left body and head kicks. He's unable to throw with any kind of restraint at all. 100% power is put into every single strike that he throws, and they're all meant to punt your head into the cheap seats. And as a result of that style, Melsik gasses out quickly, and he slows down quite a bit in the second half of fights. Melsik thrives at distance with those straight lefts and left high and body kicks because he pressures so relentlessly. He often winds up in the clinch, and when he gets there, he throws nasty knees and nasty elbows. The dude is flat out mean, and everything that he throws looks to take your head off. But he's very basic. He barely throws his right hand or his right leg at all. Everything comes from the power side, and everything is meant to knock you out. So he's very predictable as a striker. He's not going to hurt you with his right hand or his right leg. So somebody that's as elusive and as long as Culibao, if he's coached up well and has a good game plan, he might be able to easily take Melsik out of what he does well, and that's just throw the left leg and the left hand with power. He really doesn't do anything else well, and he's very, very predictable. So Melsik prefers to keep his fight standing, and he's been very successful at doing that. Keeping his fights at distance for 89% of his almost 22 minutes in the UFC cage while attempting 0 takedowns. Melsik has shown solid takedown defense and a good get-up game thus far. And since Josh has completed 0 takedowns in the UFC, I do see this fight taking place at distance striking range. So I see this as mostly a stand-up fight that should be a back-and-forth war. Josh is over 2 years younger. He's 1 inch taller, and he's got a 3-inch reach advantage here. He has more overall and UFC experience, and he's fought and beaten the better brand of UFC competition thus far. I see this fight being close on the feet, with Melsik being dangerous early and probably the more likely moment winner, while Josh's volume, takedown attempts, and superior pace and conditioning should help him to take over this fight in the second and the third. I'm going to pick Josh Culibao to win this fight by decision, everybody. You know, like I say, Baghdsaryan's very easy to figure out. He's not diverse at all. He's very predictable, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's good when you're predictable as a fighter and you're predictably throwing with your best weapons, with what your strengths are. And Melsik sticks to his strengths. His strengths are pressure and power, and he does both all the time. Now, that's obviously going to slow down as the fight goes on because you can't throw with 100% power for 15 minutes straight. It's just not how the human body works. But Culibao has been in there with some really good Muay Thai strikers already and has shown that he not only has some power, but the ability to be able to win minutes at distance here. The distance striking numbers are very good. If we look at Culibao's distance striking, we can see here that he's landing 4.17 and only absorbing 2.95, and he throws about the same amount of volume as opponents. While Melsik lands about 2 more significant strikes per minute than he absorbs, but not nearly as good of striking defense here from Melsik, while he's also a lot more accurate because he's always pressuring and he's in your face. It's really kind of hard to not get hit by him. But yeah, you look at the names: Jalen Turner, Jordan, Nurden Becca, Sungwoo Choi, and you see that here: Jay White, Art Hernandez, Bazookia, Anglin, and Sosa. Much lower level competition than what Culibao has been seeing. So yeah, definitely like Josh Culibao to win this fight by decision. The next fight that we're going to talk about is another hometown guy, Tyson Pedro at minus 237, squaring off against Modestas Bukauskas at plus 202. The fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at minus 300 here. Let me get these stats up here for you guys. And my notes up here. So, we'll start talking about Tyson. When Tyson made his UFC debut back in 2016, so 7 years ago, and that was against Khalil Roundtree, he was such a hot prospect back then. 4-0 with 4 first-round finishes prior to being in the UFC. Tyson's father owned King of the Cage in Australia, and he started training martial arts at the age of 4. And he studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and boxing from a very young age. He then proceeded to get into the UFC after winning those 4 fights in the first round. He finished Khalil Roundtree by rear naked choke in the first after getting dropped early in the round, but then he wound up taking down Khalil, getting good position on the ground and finishing him. And then he finished Paul Craig with ground and pound elbows in the first round after dropping him with straight right earlier in the round. He then lost the unanimous decision to Ilir Latifi after getting taken down 4 times and being controlled for almost 7.5 minutes. He then finished Saperbeg Safarov in the first with a nasty Kimura. But then he puts up back-to-back finish losses to Ovince St. Preux and Mauricio Shogun Rua. And then he proceeds to take almost 3.5 years off after knee surgeries, where one of the ACL surgeries that he underwent was botched. And they put the tendon through the wrong hole in the knee. So then he had to have that surgery fixed up and done correctly. So yeah, 3.5 years away from the game from Tyson Pedro. And then after those 2 losses to St. Preux and Shogun Rua, he comes back and he gets wins over Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. So man, now he's going to be taking on Modestas Bukauskas, who's taking the fight on short notice after Mingyang Zhang dropped out of this fight. So Modestas is making a quick turnaround after winning the Cage Warriors light heavyweight belt. He won that in the 4th round against Chuck Campbell via left hook back on December 31st. So he just fought on New Year's Eve. He's about 6 weeks removed, not even, from his last fight. And now he's making a quick return on short notice, quick turnaround against Tyson Pedro in front of a hostile crowd, and he's got to go from Lithuania to Australia, maybe even the UK to Australia, which would be even worse. So this is a tough spot here. Tyson Pedro is very dangerous everywhere. He's got great boxing. He's got heavy kicks. He's got a very aggressive ground game where he's constantly dropping ground and pound and hunting for submissions. And Tyson is still only 31 years old. But Modestas is about 29 years old, so he's a little bit younger. He's making his return to the UFC after being cut. He went 1-3, lost 3 fights in a row, was cut, but then won 2 fights in a row on the regional scene. He's got that win over Lee Chadwick. I was almost late to the show because I tried to watch that fight and then I had to take a 3-hour nap. That fight sucked. And then because that fight sucked so bad, I didn't even watch the Chuck Campbell fight because I was worried because that fight finished in the 4th round. If it was anything as boring as the Lee Chadwick fight, then I probably wouldn't have had the energy to even do the show today. So didn't watch the Chuck Campbell fight, but Bukauskas got a late finish in that fight. So his only win at the UFC level was over Andreas Mihalidis, and then he lost to 3 solid fighters in Jimmy Crute, Mihailo Oleksiejczuk, and Khalil Roundtree. But the Oleksiejczuk fight was really close. I thought Modestas could have gotten the nod there. Modestas has good size for the division at 6'3". He's got a 78-inch reach. He switches stances. He moves laterally very well. He's hard to find. He stays behind a long jab that he uses to maintain range. And he's got excellent conditioning. He does his best work in deep waters. Modestas usually deals with grappling-heavy approaches from his opponents. His takedown defense is just okay, but his get-up game and his conditioning are excellent. In addition to that, he can stop you with Travis Brown-style elbows. If you get sloppy and lazy on your single leg entries, he's going to blast you. And he's stopped multiple opponents with that move. So in summary, I think Modestas is really out of his depth here. The only path I see for him is Tyson being front-loaded because 100% of his career wins are by finish. And maybe if he can't finish Modestas early, he gasses out and gets finished late. That being said, I fail to see anywhere where Modestas is better than Tyson, outside of conditioning, of course. And I think that there's a huge gap in power on the feet and submission grappling ability as well. So I think the quick turnaround, coming off a 4-round fight, the short notice, combined with the long flight, the hostile crowd, and somebody as dynamic and explosive as Tyson Pedro, that this winds up being a first-round finish for Tyson Pedro here. So I'm going to pick Tyson Pedro to win this one, and I think he'll get it to the ground and win it via submission here. Welcome back, Modestas Bukauskas, but you've got bigger balls than I to take a Tyson Pedro fight on short notice, 5 weeks removed from a 4-round war. Well, I mean, I'm assuming it was a war, but I didn't watch it. And that brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the main card where we have got 4 really good fights to break down. And then we've got the Justin Tafa and Parker Porter fight. But let's get the line up here. So we've got Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menifield is the next fight. Jimmy Crute minus 185. Alonzo Menifield, the dog, at plus 160 here. And the fight doesn't go to decision, is sitting at minus 325. Let's get these stats up on the screen there. All right. So let's first talk about Alonzo Menifield here. Zo is a mountain of a man, and he's an explosive athlete with natural power. He's got 16 professional fights, and over half of them are at the UFC level. Zo started his MMA career late in life at the age of 28. All but one of Alonzo's wins comes inside the distance, and he's only been finished once in his career, and it was by Ovince St. Preux. When Menifield came into the UFC, he was strictly an athletic power puncher, but now we see him rounding out his game by mixing in the wrestling and grappling, and that paid off for him against Mozarov and against Fabio Chiron. But this is a big step up in competition for Zo. Crute is very well-rounded. He's young. He's dangerous on the ground. He's fought the much better brand of competition in comparison to Menifield. The UFC wins for Alonzo Menifield are Misha Cirkunov, who's really on his way out right now, might even be cut at this point. Askar Mozarov, who basically lied about his record to get into the UFC and shows no ground game at all. Ed Herman, who was collecting Social Security after that fight. Fabio the Water Buffalo Chiron, who was 0-4 or 0-5 in the UFC. And then Paul Craig, and Vinicius Moreira. And Moreira, I think, was 0-4 in the UFC. I mean, look, there's not big wins here at all. Jimmy Crute would be by a mile his best UFC win thus far. And so the combined records of the guys that he's beaten at the UFC level are 28 wins and 33 losses. Alonzo had Pat Barry in his corner against Serkinov, and he looked nastier and more aggressive in that fight than he had in the past. So has also been extremely difficult to win minutes against on the ground. And that's very concerning in this matchup. He stopped 21 of 23 takedowns he's faced. That's 91%. And he's only allowed his opponents 7.21% control time. Zoe is winning a whopping 83% of the control time positions he's found himself in, and he's out-controlling his opponents despite the fact that his opponents have attempted twice as many takedowns as Alonzo has. So he's very efficient at using his strength and size to win clinch and ground control spots. Alonzo also has one-punch KO power, so he's a very dangerous opponent. Jimmy Crute is still just only 27 years old. I mean, he's under 27, as a matter of fact. He's been a pro for 7 years, and he's got a 12-3 record, and he's finished 9 of his 12 pro wins inside the distance, and all 3 of his UFC wins were finishes. Crute is well-rounded, but it's his submission grappling and top control that really set him apart here at the UFC level. He's only been out of the first round once in 7 UFC fights. Jimmy's still a young, developing fighter, but thus far, he really has shown horrible game planning and horrible fight IQ so far. In the Sam Alvey fight, he hurt him bad and walked away before the ref stopped the fight. So then he had to go back there and knock out Sam Alvey again before he got that fight. And then Sam Alvey still complained to Mark Goddard that the fight got stopped too quickly. Against Anthony Smith, a guy who in his last couple of fights had been taken down and held down with no effort at all. He goes out there and is getting jabbed up by Smith at distance, attempts 0 takedowns, and on the first low leg kick that Smitty lands, Crute's nerve gets shut off and he has drop foot. And then while he's on one leg with one foot that works, he gets 3 takedowns then. And basically wins the last minute of the round with his takedowns, which he was getting easily while being on one leg. So he just really showed. I mean, I don't know if it's if it's him or if it's his coaching, but the decision making in the Smith fight was unacceptable. Should have been an easy win for him, and he lost that fight. And then he goes out there against Jamal Hill and basically does the same thing. Gets sparked while trying 0 takedown attempts, and then not until he gets sparked does he start shooting takedowns and start doing what he's supposed to be doing. But we got to remember, I mean, he's losing to Anthony Smith, who fought for the title. He's losing to Jamal Hill, who has the title now. He's beating guys like Oleg Sachek, like Alvey, guys that have been around, like Paul Craig. Misha Serkinov beats him by submission, catches him in a Peruvian necktie. But yeah, because of that horrible decision-making, because of that horrible fight IQ, you just don't lay juice on Jimmy Crute, especially against somebody as dangerous as Alonzo Menifield. So I just think it's impossible to lay juice on somebody that's made as bad decisions in the cage and in the barber chair, let's face it, as Jimmy Crute has, is that mullet that he came out with against Jamal Hill was absolutely unacceptable. So this is the first time, though, that Alonzo Menifield has fought outside of the U.S., and it's in Australia, like a 22-hour flight from Texas. So I hate the fact that this fight is so far from home and in front of a hostile crowd, and also against an opponent that has fought the much better level of competition than Jimmy Crute. Stylistically, though, outside of those narrative issues, I see this being a very close fight, everyone. I don't think Crute can take Zoe down and hold him there. And if he can't do that, I don't see him winning many minutes in the clinch due to Zoe being so strong and so hard to control. And on the feet, while Crute is faster and he's more technical, Zoe's got one punch power, and that can change a fight in a second. So I think they're well matched on the feet, and I think Zoe can weather the early storm from Crute and maybe even get a takedown of his own and land some ground and pound. But I'm picking Alonzo Menifield to win this fight by second round knockout because A, we haven't seen Jimmy Crute win a fight outside of the first round yet at the UFC level. B, we can't count on Jimmy Crute to make good decisions and have good game plans in the cage. And because of that, it makes it almost impossible to lay juice on him. And C, I don't see how you could come to the conclusion that Jimmy Crute's going to be more dangerous than Alonzo Menifield is on the feet here. He'll be faster. He'll be more technical. He'll be the better boxer. But, I mean, if he stands in the pocket and just trades with Zoe and Zoe finds his chin, it's going to be Zoe that goes that gets Crute to go down and probably not the other way around. So it's going to be a very interesting fight. But even if you look at the distance striking numbers thus far in the UFC level, while you see some good knockdown numbers for Jimmy Crute here, you see better differential here for Menifield while actually throwing less volume than his opponents, better accuracy and better defense. And Crute's getting knocked down on 2% of the distance strikes that he absorbs, while it's only 1.36% for Menifield. And he's only been dropped once, and it was by Ovince St. Preux. So, yeah, I can't see, laying juice on Jimmy Crute here. And as long as Menifield handles the flight well and adjusts well to the time zone, I think he's going to perform well. But that's a big if. I mean, if you're a big guy and you've ever been on a plane, a long plane ride, you know how much that takes out of you. And Alonzo Menifield's not just a big dude. I mean, he's huge. And being, on a plane for 22 hours is a bad way to spend 72 hours before a fight. And if he doesn't get out there early enough, this is going to be a very tough road to hoe for him. But if he gets there, if he adjusts to the time and he's not too jet lagged and he's ready to go and he has a good weight cut, I think skill for skill, these guys are very well matched. While Menifield's not nearly the grappler that Crute is, Crute is not nearly the athlete or the explosive athlete that Alonzo Menifield is here. So yeah, I'm going to go with the upset here, but this would be by far the best win of Alonzo Menifield's career, without question. And this is a huge step up in competition against Jimmy the Brute Crute. But I am picking Menifield to win this one by second round knockout. And then next, we've got the people's main event. We've got Justin Tafa at minus 120 going up against the world's largest ass in Parker Porter, plus 100. I heard that they weren't even thinking of bringing Porter to Australia because they felt that the mass of Porter's ass could actually tip over the entire continent. But evidently the scientists had done some calculations, figured out that it would be safe, and I think that they probably just barely had to do any work to stabilize some things and await Parker Porter's return. But here we go, you guys. A low-level heavyweight fight on a pay-per-view card, something that the UFC does to us over and over again. Why? I don't know, but they do it, and here we are. So, yeah, Tafa minus 120, Porter plus 100. Fight doesn't go, sitting at minus 180. So, let's first talk about Justin Tafa. I rate Justin Tafa very, very, very low in this division. And this is the lowest skill division in the UFC. He's got serviceable stand-up and not much else. Justin Tafa actually missed weight as a heavyweight. The first guy to have that dubious distinction of not being able to make 266 pounds for a professional fight, despite the fact that he's only 6 feet tall. I mean, dude, if I ballooned up to 266 and I'm 6'2", I'd probably be in a hospital bed somewhere. So how the hell Justin Tafa at 29 years old can't make 266 is a gigantic red flag as to how professional this guy is and how seriously he takes his career. So he's missed weight. He's got losses at the UFC level to Jared Vanderaa, Carlos Felipe, and Jorgen De Astro. And he got finished in the first round by De Astro. I have no clue why Justin Tafa is in the UFC. None. Tafa gets outlanded and outthrown at distance by significant margins, but he has landed 2 knockdowns while only absorbing 1 at the UFC level. His 2 UFC wins are against maybe the worst heavyweights to ever step in the cage in UFC history, in Juan Adams and Harry Hunsucker. All that being said, this line is probably fair. I mean, Tafa is not UFC level. He is trash in comparison to the rest of the division. But Tafa is still 8 years younger. He's fighting at home in front of a friendly crowd against a guy who's been finished in all of his losses, who's flying from the Northeast. He's like a Connecticut guy, all the way to Australia. If this fight were in Vegas, I'd have Parker probably capped at like minus 150, maybe minus 175 against Tafa. Tafa's got no ground game at all, so he better not let Parker and his huge ass get on top of him, or else he could easily get finished. Parker Porter is a journeyman, though. He's got a 12-7 pro record. He's got a 3-2 record in the UFC, and he's been finished in every pro loss. He actually can wrestle a little, and he's got a smothering top game. When he gets on top of people, it's just hard to get a man the size of Parker Porter with the size of ass that he has off of you. And he even hunts for the occasional submission. He's got a smothering top game, decent ground and pound. So he can, he can find success in areas where we've never seen Justin Tafa find any success in his pro career. On the feet, Parker throws lots of volume, and he stays long. He attempts 17.5 distance strikes per minute that he is at distance, while for Tafa, it's only 12.5. And Parker also outlands his opponents at distance, while Tafa gets outlanded. And Parker will have a 1-inch reach advantage here. So he's got good conditioning for a man his size and output that he throws in this division. And he's fought the much better brand of competition inside the UFC and outside of it. So this is a low-level fight, but if Parker travels well and he fights smart, he should cruise against a one-dimensional boxer like Tafa, who actually gets outboxed by guys who suck at boxing, like Jared Vanderaa. So Parker has shown the ability to win minutes on the ground. He throws more volume. He's fought and beaten the better guys in comparison to Tafa. So, I mean, I guess I have to pick Parker Porter to win by greasy decision here, but it's just a tall order for a man the size of Parker Porter to get on a plane that he's not going to fit on. That could, they're probably going to have him in a special seat in the center of the plane so that his ass doesn't weigh down one half of the plane more than the other, which could cause undue stress on one of the engines, could cause a fucking plane crash. I mean, if it were only a 2 or 3 hour flight, it probably wouldn't be a problem. But for 22 hours of Parker Porter's ass weighing down one half of the plane, I don't think tin can handle that much weight at times. And as good and as structurally sound as these airplanes are, and the hardworking men who do the maintenance on them, they're heroes. But I don't know if even those heroes can prepare for a 22-hour flight with Parker Porter's ass. So it's going to be a very tough travel week for Parker Porter. But if all that goes well and those narrative issues don't bother him, he should get this win here because, I mean, I suppose Justin Tafa could be getting better, but he better be. Because if he's not getting better, and clearly, I mean, if you don't make weight at heavyweight, there's no way you're taking shit seriously. There's no way you're taking your diet or your exercise seriously. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I got to pick Parker Porter here, but I don't know if I'm going to get to a bet. It's hard to pick somebody in Australia going out there to win. But yeah, Parker Porter by decision, we'll say here, against the bum and Justin Tafa. The next fight, Jack Della Maddalena going up against Randy Rude Boy Brown. Della Maddalena a minus 300 favorite. The Rude Boy plus 250. Fight doesn't go to decision, juiced up to minus 200. Let's see here. All right. Just checking the chat here to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, my guy Clint's in the chat. Happy birthday, any action, Effie, he says. What's up, Mushroom? Good to see Clinton here. And also, happy birthday to my guy, Danny. Danny Betts from Pub Sports Radio. It's his 34th birthday. Boy, what I would give to be 34 again, man. I'm much older than that. But yeah, happy birthday, Effie. Happy birthday to my guy, Danny Betts, man. But the next fight is going to be this Randy Rude Boy Brown against Jack Della Maddalena fight, and it is going to be a banger. Can't wait. Big step up in competition for Maddalena. Well, not that big, but Randy Brown's been hot lately. Randy Brown's got a 4-fight winning streak right now, and he's fought the better brand of competition, and he's much longer. So let's start talking about Jack Della, though, here. He's an absolute stud of a prospect who's got a ton of hype behind him, and for very good reason. He's currently on a 13-fight win streak, with 12 of those wins coming inside the distance. All 3 of his UFC wins were first-round stoppages, all of them by KO. On the feet, Jack has got fantastic boxing. He switches stances effortlessly, and he stays behind a long jab that he throws from both stances. He moves in and out of range, and he's got real power in both hands. If you just stand in front of this kid and box with him, you're going to have a bad time. I promise you that. Jack has been put into some bad spots on the ground before by Lusa and Amiv, but he gutted them out. He showed patience and toughness and wound up getting out of those spots. And people really haven't been able to take him down and hold him down thus far in the UFC. And we see that Randy Brown on the screen here, he's got 14 UFC fights, and he's completed a grand total of 7 takedowns, and he's gotten only 18% control time for. So really, we can't count on Randy to be like the first guy that takes down Jack Della Maddalena and maybe wins a round with some wrestling and some ground control and some grappling, because we just haven't seen that yet. Anybody do that to Jack yet. And if he can't do that to Jack, and you just have to stand there and box with this guy who uses his length so well, who feints, who switches stances, who's got power in both hands, and who's got a fantastic chin that can stand in the pocket and trade with you, take your best shot when you can't take his. So, man, Jack is fighting in front of his hometown crowd in Perth. This is in Perth, and that's where he's from. So this is going to be a really, really tough road to hoe for Randy Brown here. But Randy Brown's 4 inches taller. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage, and he's got 11 more fights at the UFC level. The guys that Randy Brown has fought at the UFC level have a combined record of 94 wins and 61 losses. So they are really, really good guys, and they're guys that are getting the job done here. But Randy at distance is doing a good job. We can see here that he lands 5.93 strikes a minute at distance, that per minute that he spends at distance, and he absorbs 4.82. But he's throwing 14.11 while his opponents are throwing 11.47. So he outlands his opponents and he outvolumes his opponents. He's got decent accuracy here. He's landing a knockdown on less than 1% of the significant strikes that he lands. And he's absorbing a knockdown on less than 1% of the significant strikes that he absorbs. While Jack Della is landing one on 5% of the knockdowns that he lands. 5% of the distance strikes that he lands result in a knockdown. So 1 out of 20 distance strikes that he lands winds up resulting in a knockdown. So big power numbers for Jack. And then you see him at distance. He lands 10.25, and his opponents only land 4.73. And that's with him throwing 4 more significant strike attempts per minute at distance than his opponents do. And he's showing a 71% striking defense compared to a 58% striking defense for Randy Brown. So, and then we saw Randy Brown, win a unanimous decision against Francisco Trinaldo, win a split decision against Chaos Williams that easily could have went either way, but I don't think Trinaldo or Chaos Williams have the level of boxing that Jack Della Maddalena has at this point. And we've just never seen Randy Brown go out there and use his grappling to get fights to the ground and then win it there. So I've got to go with Jack Della Maddalena, and I've got to pick him to win this fight by second round knockout. I think he's going to just keep doing what he does. And until somebody winds up being able to test Jack's ground game, I think Jack's just going to continue to show why he's one of the best strikers in the welterweight division right now. And I don't think anybody's going to have much for him on the feet. And he's got one of those things that you really need to have in order to be considered top notch in any division, and that's durability. He was finished in his only 2 losses, but they were his first 2 pro fights. Outside of that, this guy can take a shot. He has absorbed some strikes from some heavy hitters like Danny Roberts, like Angalusa. So I'm expecting Jack to get the job done here. I get why some people are taking the plus money shot on Randy Brown. He's more experienced. He's longer. He's taller. He is the better submission grappler here and has had some really good success doing some of those things. But the wrestling isn't just at a point where we can count on Randy to go out there and we could say, yeah, I think Randy's going to go out there and get takedowns in each round and win some minutes on the ground and make Jack really uncomfortable, test his conditioning, test his ability to fight in deep waters. But that's just not Randy's game. And if he's not able to do that, I don't see him getting this win. So, yeah, Jack Della Maddalena in front of the hometown crowd, and I see him getting another finish. The next fight is going to be Yair Rodrigues going up against Josh Emmett. 5-round fight that is going to be for the interim featherweight championship. And whoever wins this fight is going to get a matchup against Alexander Volkanovski after he comes back down to 145. So the line on this one is Yair is a favorite right now at minus 171. Josh Emmett come back at plus 146, and the fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at plus 100. So Yair Rodrigues is 7 years younger here. He's 5 inches taller, and he's got a 1-inch reach advantage. In terms of experience, Josh has got 2 more pro fights, about 30 more minutes in the pro cage, actually 40 more minutes in the pro cage. But in terms of UFC experience, they got very similar numbers. Yair, 1 more fight and about 16 more minutes in the UFC cage. So the experience numbers, very similar, but Yair, much younger and much taller than Josh. In terms of finishing, Josh Emmett has finished 1/3 of his UFC fights. For Yair, it's 4 out of 9. And it's Yair who's been the better finisher overall as a pro. Both of these guys have been finished in their losses. Emmett, 1 of 2 losses, he's been knocked out. And Yair has been finished in 2 of his 3 overall losses and in 1 of 2 UFC losses. When this thing is on the feet, Josh Emmett has some of the biggest power numbers that you're going to find in the division. He's landing a knockdown on 2% of the distance strikes that he lands. He's got several knockdowns in his career. And he's also got, but he absorbs more strikes than he lands. But that's fine, because when you land with the kind of power that Emmett does, you can lose minutes because you can always count on your moment-winning potential to bail you out. But you look at a guy like Rodrigues, he's landing knockdowns too, but his distance striking numbers are just much better. 13.67 offered per minute, only about 11 coming back his way. He outlands his opponents by about 1.4 significant strikes per minute spent at distance. He's spending about 64% of his time at distance, while Emmett is spending about 90% of his time at distance. So Emmett is a guy where I feel he would be best suited to mix in the wrestling here, because that's where we've seen Yair actually give up some minutes. He's only winning 25% of the control time positions that he's in, and his opponents are out-controlling him 27% to 9%. So that is not a good spot to be in when you're giving up minutes on the ground. But Josh Emmett is a guy who's completed 10 takedowns in 11 UFC fights, but I believe 8 of those takedowns came in 1 fight against Scott Holtzman. Outside of the Holtzman fight, we haven't seen Josh Emmett wrestle at all. And He's rumored to have a hip injury coming into this fight. And if that's the case, then we really can't count on him to wrestle. And then it might be a lot more difficult for him to be elusive if the footwork doesn't have him being hard to find against Yair Rodrigues. Yair does a great job of maintaining distance because he throws so many kicks, and definitely kicking range just is much more long than punching range. Yair Rodrigues has never been dropped in 12 UFC fights. He's been in there with guys like Korean Zombie, like Jeremy Stevens, Max Holloway. He's been in there with some of the biggest power punchers that the division has to offer, and he's never been knocked down. So I worry because I don't see Josh being able to win minutes, right, in the grappling exchanges here, because we haven't seen him grapple in literally years. And especially if he is injured, he's not going to be out there shooting takedowns if he's got a bum hip. So if he can't win minutes on the ground, he basically gets reduced to a guy with a puncher's chance here. And that's going to be a problem because Yair Rodrigues was picking apart Max Holloway from distance. And if he can pick apart a boxer, the quality and the length of Max Holloway at distance, he's going to do the same thing to Josh Emmett. It's going to be very difficult for Emmett to find ways to win minutes in this fight outside of landing a big shot. And Yair Rodrigues has spent 162 minutes in the UFC cage. He's never even been dropped once. 7 years younger, 5 inches taller, 1 inch reach advantage, a UFC experience advantage. In terms of the strength of schedule, very similar numbers, but Yair's fighting the more experienced competition overall. But I would rate Josh Emmett's wins a little bit better than Yair's. He's got a 1.31 ratio in his wins, and for Yair it's 1.08. But it's Yair who's beating a slightly more experienced competition in comparison to Emmett. It's a close fight. It's a great fight. But I just think Josh Emmett's coming to the end of his run here. The guy who's been knocking people out with power shots, I just don't see him being able to offer anything outside of that's going to make Yair that nervous. And in that case, I got to believe that Yair is going to win the minutes at distance. And if Josh Emmett is hurt here, we could see him getting finished by a striker the quality of Yair Rodrigues. But I am going to pick Yair Rodrigues to win this one by decision because Josh Emmett is a tough dude and a tough out. And even if he is hurt, I think that Josh will fight hurt and will go for the full 5 rounds because he's built different. He's a scrappy dude. There's no quit in Josh Emmett. So I don't expect there for the quit to start showing now. But I'm picking Yair Rodrigues to win this one by decision. Which brings us to the main event. Islam Makhachev, maybe the best fighter on planet Earth right now, at -405, squaring off against a guy that's absolutely cleaned out the featherweight division and is maybe the best featherweight fighter of all time in Alexander the Great Volkanovski, +305. Fight doesn't go to decision, sitting at -175. And I promise you, the rest of this year, you will never find a fighter the quality of Alexander Volkanovski at a number like +305. The problem is that he's facing off against a guy in Islam Makhachev who might be the best fighter on the planet right now and certainly is considered by most to be the top pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. So, let's see. Hang on just a second here. We've got 58 of you in here live hanging out with your Uncle Weezy. Smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And please consider joining the Patreon. But let's get back to breaking down this fight. We got Perdition Shark saying, "What's up, Uncle? Oi, brother. God bless. Good to see you in here." We got Bout Better saying Emmett has wrestling that he won't use. And exactly. He has wrestling and he won't use it. Go saying Night Mushroom. God bless. We got Mushroom saying Makhachev inside the distance. Sprinkling Makhachev each round 3, 4, and 5 as well. Best of luck. Good night to all. Thank you for hanging out, Mushroom. So this fight is the only one that I didn't get to tape on. But here's what I'm thinking. And I don't want to oversimplify this, but Islam Makhachev in his UFC career, in 13 fights has only completed 27 takedowns, which is pretty crazy to consider that, he's been 118 minutes in the cage, and he's controlled his opponents 53% of the time. So that is, 60 minutes on only 27 takedowns. So he's averaging over 2 minutes of control time per takedown that he's gotten at the UFC level. In other words, if he takes you down, you're not getting up. You're either getting subbed or you just stay on your back trying to fend off submission attempts and ground and pound until the bell rings. And then you get to go back to your corner and ask your corner what the fuck just happened. This guy won't fuck off. He won't fucking stop pressuring me. And when he takes me down, he won't fucking get off of me. There are weight classes for a reason. And Alexander Volkanovski has shown 73% takedown defense at the UFC level. He's been taken down 8 times on 30 attempts against. But that's only 30 attempts in 12 fights. So Volkanovski just hasn't seen a lot of wrestling. And he's attempted twice as many takedowns as his opponents. But look, Volk has done great. He's controlling his opponents 22% of the time, and he's giving up less than 3% control time against. So on paper, Volk is a very good minute winner, very stingy in giving up takedowns and allowing his opponents to win minutes in control time positions. But Islam Makhachev is just different there. Like I said, the weight classes do exist for a reason, and you got a guy who takes down literally everybody that he wrestles at 155, and now you got a 145er who we haven't seen tested much in the wrestling at the UFC level, and now he's got to face the best wrestler, in maybe any division right now in the UFC. I mean, Makhachev has the most functional wrestling and top control game out of anybody in the UFC. And then he's showing massive improvements to the striking as well. The striking against Charles Oliveira looked absolutely fantastic. And I think that maybe he could even hang on the feet with somebody as long as Volkanovski is for the division. 71-inch reach, while Makhachev only has a 70-inch reach. So Volkanovski, we've seen him against longer, taller fighters like Max Holloway be the one that controls range, that can stay just out of range when his opponent is throwing, but get into range when he's throwing. So there's going to be a lot of intricacies with the distance striking game that we're going to find out how Islam Makhachev deals in situations like that with a striker the quality of Alexander Volkanovski. But the question that I think is most important to ask ourselves here when handicapping this fight is, if Makhachev wants to take Volkanovski down, is there anything that Alex is going to be able to do to stop him? And I mean, the answer that I think I'm looking forward to here is no. Of course he can't. If somebody would have stopped Islam Makhachev's ground game, we would have already seen it at this point. And it's certainly not going to be a bantamweight or a featherweight that gets this guy to fuck off. It's going to have to be him moving up to 170 to fight Khamzat to see, can Khamzat stop his takedowns? Can Khamzat go 3 rounds? Can he go into deep waters with a guy the wrestling pedigree of Islam Makhachev? Khabib never lost. And this guy beats Khabib right now, So if Khabib was one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and Makhachev is now taking his place, with that throne, the best, most functional MMA wrestling game that's available right now, how does Volkanovski stop that? And the answer is he just doesn't. It's going to be Makhachev all day here. He's going to win this fight. And I mean, even if Makhachev gets no takedowns, I think that this could be close. The striking that we saw from Islam last time out looks like it's been improving by leaps and bounds. And even if it winds up being a striking match, you still have to keep that in your back of your mind constantly. This guy could take me down. If he catches me flat-footed and he gets the takedown and gets to half guard, and gets wrist control, then I'm going to be here for the rest of the round. I'm going to lose that round. So, yeah, this looks like it's going to be almost impossible for Alexander to keep the fight standing, to win minutes there, and to, because he doesn't have the kind of one punch power to end Islam Makhachev's night with just one mistake. And outside of that, even if he does spark Islam could probably panic wrestle and get him to the ground and win the rest of the round there. So it's got to be Islam. Yeah, and my guy Tajik Bey, I know he's picking Volk by split, period. I just don't see it. I don't see it. The GOAT is going on the contrarian side here. He's taking the big plus 300 underdog in this spot. But I am going with Islam Makhachev. I think that wrestling always dominates, and Alexander Volkanovski does not have the wrestling background that Islam Makhachev has. And I have a very hard time believing he's going to be able to stop the takedowns and deal with the pressure that Islam brings and makes him such an amazing fighter. And ring a ding, ding. My guy Gogo Flamingo with the $10 donation saying Islam and Habib are natural welterweights. Look at the photos of them with GSP. Both are a bit bigger. Volk is an average size featherweight, essentially going up 2 weight classes. Yeah, that's the way I feel about this as well. But if there's one guy on the planet that has the well-rounded skill set and the amazing striking to maybe give Islam Makhachev troubles, it's the guy who's cleaned out the entire featherweight division and looked classy doing it. So it is going to be one hell of a spot. Tajik Bey is calling by 20 plus 2,200 by split decision for Volkanovski in front of the hometown crowd. He says, I don't see why not. And if Ji Ya can win 90% of a fight with wrestling and then actually pretend like he lost the fight, why can't the judges rob Islam if he can't get Volkanovski out of there and they don't credit him for any of the wrestling or top control that he gets? Hey, man, these judges are corrupt as hell, so you might as well take some shots like that. I appreciate all of you guys hanging out here for another episode of Just a Tip with your Uncle Weezy. We did it. We got through all of these fights, and the last prediction is going to be Islam Makhachev, and I'm going to pick him to win by decision, just grinding out Volkanovski. But I think Volkanovski will be able to stay safe from the submissions and just get 50-45 or even 50-44 to 50-40-30 by the superior wrestler in Islam Makhachev. So we've got my tracked bets so far for UFC 284. There are only 2 of them thus far, but I've been preparing for the show for the last 2 days. I usually write about 15, 16 pages of notes for this show. I try to watch about an hour to 2 of tape on each fight. So I've just spent a lot of time getting ready. I'm going to finish up the show tonight, put timestamps on it, and then I'm going to go through all my research, find any other additional lines that stick out. But I've got 2 over-under bets that we talked about on Probability on the MMA Engine YouTube channel today or yesterday. And the first one was 1.5 units on that Crute Menifield under 1.5 rounds. That one we got at minus 113. It's moving. But here on the prop template, you can see that at minus 120, that was a 54% implied probability. But if we look at under 1.5 rates for the division, it's 45.81%. So it's overpriced by 8.74% in comparison to the benchmark. But Alonzo Menifield fights have finished under 1.5 rounds 5 of 9 times at the UFC level. For Crute, it's 6 of 7. So that's 11 of 16, or 68.75% of their fights have finished under 1.5 rounds. And we're only paying 54% at minus 120 for the under 1.5. So that was a really good line. And with Menifield's power and with Crute's really slick submission grappling game, I see somebody being dangerous no matter where this fight goes. And only one of Crute's fights, like I said, at the UFC level has even made it out of the first round. So I could definitely see this fight going under 1.5, and the price is definitely right. And outside the UFC, these guys go under 1.5 rounds 83.33% of the time. So that was a cheap line. I put 1.5 units on that one to win a little over 1. And then the other one that I got was the under 1.5 rounds in the Mullarkey versus Prado fight. as Prado is taking this fight on short notice. He's only seen the third round once in his career, and all of his fights have finished inside the distance. He hits like a truck, but, you know, he's making a very long flight on short notice to fight a fight in front of a very hostile crowd and potentially have an adrenaline dump making his UFC debut. There could be a lot of nerves, and he's probably going to come out trying to finish this fight early like he does all of his opponents. And if that doesn't happen, I think Mullarkey gets him out of there early in the second round. So those are two good under 1.5s. And I'm also looking at the under 1.5 in the Tyson Pedro Modestas Bukauskas fight. The analytics like that one at plus 117 right now, available on Bet Online. All the lines that you've seen on today's show are courtesy of Bet Online Sportsbook. And that brings us with only one more thing to do on the day, you guys, and it is Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week. Who is going to get it done, you guys? Who is going to shave ass this week? Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat here. As we've got Creep in the room saying, "Oi, happy Tuesday, Weezy. I may be biased because I filmed his wedding, but I really think my guy Beneil can beat Islam." Yeah, Beneil Dariush is a quality fighter, very well-rounded, excellent submission grappler, excellent stand-up, great scrambles, as we saw in the Mateusz Gamrot fight. Yeah, he could give Islam Makhachev some problems, and he will be fighting Islam Makhachev, I think, if he can get one more big win here at 155. So I'm a big fan of Beneil Dariush. We got Islam round 1, 2, 3. Free money says go. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe it might take him a little bit longer than that. I'm picking him to win by decision, but we'll see what happens, man. Islam Makhachev is a different level of top control. And we all know anything can happen in the blink of an eye in any fight. My guy, Real Deal Prime in the room saying wrestling rules. Well, this week's Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week, I almost made it the main event, Islam Makhachev over Alexander Volkanovski, but I felt that would really be disrespectful to Volkanovski, especially fighting at home, as somebody that's done as great a work as he's done in the featherweight division. But like I say, coming up to fight Islam Makhachev, who cuts a ton of weight to make 156, is going to be, you know, a very tall order, and he's got to get down to 155 for this one. So we will see. And we got Justin Villegas saying Reed ass shave Loma and annoy her on the cage. I don't think Reed's going to shave Loma's ass. Massive ass shaving, Parker by butt slam. I love it. But this week, you guys, I am going with Kleydson Rodrigues to shave the ass of Shannon Ross. You know, I think that Kleydson really had problems with the power with the pressure that CJ Vergara brought, but I don't see Shannon Ross bringing that kind of pressure. And if he doesn't, I think he's just going to get absolutely destroyed at range by the far superior and more diverse striker in Kleydson Rodrigues. Kleidson's much younger. He's probably going to fight much better brand of competition over his career. But up to this point, there just aren't any wins on Shannon Ross's resume that are any better than the wins that Kleydson Rodrigues has gotten at this point. And he even got a good win over a champion, regional scene champion in Santo Curatolo, made him look really bad. So if you can't get this guy with wrestling or pressure, I think he's going to pick you apart. And I think it's going to be an easy win here over a guy that I don't really think belongs in the UFC. He's a journeyman with a very limited skill set. He's scrappy, he's tough, but that's not enough at this level. Kleydson Rodrigues is just way more talented, way more dangerous, way more well-rounded, and he's a lot younger, and his career is at a completely different trajectory right now than where Shannon Ross's is. As long as the long flight and the hostile crowd doesn't get to Kleydson Rodrigues, I think he's going to make this one look easy. You guys, thank you for hanging out with me. Tuesday night, we always do it this way on my channel. 56 of you live, hanging with your Uncle Weezy. I appreciate you. Hit that like on your way out. Tomorrow, you can find me at 6 o'clock on Pub Sports Radio doing the DFS show with my guys DFS by the Numbers, Monk, and Gordo. And then you can find me at 8 o'clock Central Time on Addicted to Combat, my guy Patrick's channel. We're going to break down this fight for UFC 284. We're going to share our bets with each other, see if we can talk each other into anything stupid this week with a big parlay or something. But check me out tomorrow on Pub Sports and tomorrow on Patrick's channel. And I'll also be dropping a greasy 4-leg parlay here on my channel shortly. And we might even do an Ask Weezy this week because it's a pay-per-view week. But it's going to be a busy day for me tomorrow. So definitely not tomorrow, but maybe Thursday we'll do something. But I appreciate all you guys hanging out live with me on Tuesday night for Just a Tip with me, your host, Uncle Weezy. God bless each and every one of you guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday, and let's all stack cash tickets like flapjacks on UFC 284. Good night, everybody.